It's almost always raining in the city. Somerset, the veteran detective, and Mills, the kid who has just been transferred into the district, were faced with a horrifying case, a series of murders, each a punishment for a sin.
There are 7 deadly sins, Captain.
As they chase the killer, they realize they're not just hunting a criminal, but a monster playing a deadly game. Will they stop him before he punishes everyone? The story unfolds over 7 days, during which the two detectives investigate a series of crimes while trying to uncover the perpetrator's identity. Somerset and Mills are different characters. Somerset is portrayed as a calm, introspective detective nearing retirement, with the hopes of living a solitary life away from the city. However, his actions at crime scenes reveal his true priorities and concerns. Mills, however, gets emotional and often ends up in tough situations because of it. He's married, optimistic, young, and full of energy. These things make him vulnerable when the killer messes with him. The serial killer is seen as crazy by Mills, but he's calm and serious about his murders. He walks a strange line between being a hateful criminal and someone who thinks they're punishing people like in the Bible. After they first meet, the two detectives get a call about an overweight man who died with his face in a bowl of spaghetti. It turns out he was forced to eat until his stomach burst, with a gun pointed at him. Somerset realizes this is part of something bigger. This grim death sets the tone for David Fincher's Se7en, one of the darkest and most merciless films ever made in the Hollywood mainstream. It will rain day after day and they will investigate death after death. Then they find the word gluttony written on the wall. This represents the first sin, gluttony. There is a scene where the serial killer abducts a lawyer and straps him to a bed. He then forces the lawyer to choose between killing a prostitute or cutting off a piece of his own flesh. In an act of desperation, the lawyer chooses to mutilate himself. As he agonizingly cuts into his own body, the word greed is spelled with his blood on the floor, symbolizing the second sin, greed. Somerset goes to the library to research more and finds fingerprints at the scene of the greed killing. Following the trail, they find a suspect, a drug dealer who's been tortured and dragged for a year and is in a state of extreme decay and emaciation, representing the third sin of sloth. The doctor treating him says he's been through unimaginable suffering and still has more to come. This suggests he might be a victim of the crimes rather than the perpetrator. It becomes glaringly that these killings aren't just random acts of violence. Instead, there is a sinister purpose behind them. They are executions carried out as punishments for people's sins, taken to the most extreme measures imaginable. Another day passes without a new murder, during which Somerset engages in a heartfelt conversation with Mills's wife, Tracy, who brings a note of humanity into the picture. We never find out very much about her, but we know she loves her husband and worries about him, and she has good instincts when she invites the never-married Somerset over for dinner. Best to make an ally of the man whom her husband needs and can learn from. She confides in him that she's pregnant, a secret that Mills is yet to know about. Watching the film, we assume the Tracy character is simply a placeholder, labeled protagonist's wife, and denied many dimensions. But she is saving her impact until later. The fourth sin is lust. Doe forced a man at gunpoint to rape an unnamed sex worker using a bladed implement. Following that, Doe goes on to the sixth sin, pride, and his next victim is Rachel Slade, a model. Doe mutilates Slade's face and then offers her the choice of calling for help and suffering with her disfigured body or killing herself with an overdose of sleeping pills. Slade chose the latter, becoming Doe's sixth murder victim and representing the sin of pride. Surprisingly, the killer, John Doe, surrenders himself. However, their relief is short-lived as it becomes apparent that his surrender is merely a ploy in his elaborate game. With Doe now in custody, his lawyer resorts to blackmail, offering a full confession only in exchange for the detectives' cooperation in uncovering the locations of the final two sins. Faced with a moral dilemma, the detectives reluctantly agree, setting the stage for a nail-biting climax at a desolate location where the true extent of Doe's vicious plan will be revealed. John blames the city for its problems. He thinks that allowing bad things, like serious sins, to happen without consequences is making people forget what's right and wrong. It's interesting because this idea of being tolerant of an offense is similar to how Somerset feels. He's tired of it all and wants to leave the city behind. As we see all the awful things unfolding in the city in Se7en, it's becoming difficult to ignore John's criticism and not see some truth in what he's saying about the city's moral decay. It's like a vicious cycle. The more bad things happen without punishment, the more people start to accept them as normal. Se7en shared a piece of wisdom with us. When you're in danger, it's better to shout fire than help, because most people will pay attention. It's a sad truth that even when Mills was chasing after Doe, with gunshots ringing out, the people in the neighborhood yelled at them to keep quiet instead of offering help. It seems like the city has grown accustomed to turning a blind eye to crime as long as it doesn't intrude their personal space. However, Doe, the mastermind behind the gruesome murders, has a different perspective. He rejects the modern, perhaps more liberal attitudes of tolerance and instead sees it as his duty, almost a calling from the Bible, to expose the city and ensure that those who openly commit sins face dire consequences. To him, it's a form of divine justice, forcing sinners to pay the ultimate price for their sins, even at the expense of their lives. Interestingly, love doesn't seem to play a role in Se7en, not even in the relationship between Mills and his wife. Unlike the police in this movie, who seem to only do their job because they have to go or for their benefit, Doe follows what he sees as a higher sense of justice. He goes after people who sin, whether they do it openly or in secret. Doe intends to elaborate his murders as a moral statement. He suggests as much after we meet him. When he's told his crimes will soon be forgotten in a daily rush of cruelty, he insists that they will forever be remembered. They are his masterpiece. What goes unexplained is how exactly he is making a statement. His victims, presumably guilty of their sins, have been convicted and executed for his actions. What's the lesson? Let that be a warning to us. Se7en reminds us that we're living in a modern world, and as such, there is no divine presence to punish sinners, only man who takes sinners' misdeeds and turns them against them, making him a sinner as well. And as Doe seeks divine vengeance on the debris of the nameless rainy city, he also condemns himself. Doe, as we watched, turns himself in with 30 minutes to go and dominates the film from that point forward. As they finally arrive at the location of the last two scenes, Se7en and Mills discover a delivery van with a package inside. As they cautiously approach, they find a box containing the severed head of Tracy, Mills' wife. The shock of horror on Mills' face are palpable as he realizes what he is seeing. Doe's meticulous planning becomes evident as he reveals the sixth sin of envy he had for Tracy and Mills' relationship, and that her death was part of his plan to complete the sixth sin. He jeered at Mills, revealing that Tracy was pregnant and that her death was a consequence of Mills' own sins and shortcomings as a husband. Doe's actions and words throughout the movie reflect his actions is above conventional morality. His arrogance is palpable as he justifies his gruesome murders as necessary acts in pursuit of a greater good. The meticulous and twisted serial killings orchestrates every moment with the intention of showcasing his perceived moral superiority. Despite Somerset's earnest pleas, cautioning that killing Doe would signify their defeat, Mills succumbs to wrath and takes Doe's life. This signifies the seventh sin of wrath. However, it is upon closer examination of Doe's threatening message written on the wall, "Long is the way and hard that out of hell leads up to light," and the touching quote from Hemingway, eloquently spoken by Somerset in the film's concluding moments, that we glimpse the profound essence of David Fincher's Se7en. Despite the horrifying scenes, awful deeds, and the overwhelming darkness that fills his city, burdening his soul each day, Somerset leaves us not only with hope, but also with a sense of obligation to correct what is unjust. Even though the city is filled with scary things and bad stuff happens every day, Somerset still gives us hope. He also makes us feel like we must fix things that aren't fair. After 28 years, this is still one of the greatest movies ever made. See you next time.